195 billion 476. So there's an increase of 3.5 billion under the Senate version versus the House version, Mr. President. I'm now ready for interpellation.
To start the interpellations, Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Richard Gordon.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will try to be very, very brief because I have really pressing commitments. And will the gentleman, my good friend Senator Lacson, yield for it?
Willingly, Mr. President, to the gentleman, distinguished gentleman from Olongapo in the Republic of the Philippines, also from Cavite.
From Imus, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is, I would say, one of the most important departments of our country, the defense of the state, and this is lodged in our armed forces. And first of all, I'd like to commend the men and women of our armed services who did a very, very superb job. It took a little longer, but nonetheless, they swept the enemies of the state at a terrific cost. People, our soldiers died, some were maimed, and I think it behooves that the Senate recognize them the regular session after the budget, that we give adequate recognition to our soldiers in uniform, as well as the others, Your Honor. Having said that, Your Honor, I would like to say at the outset that I'm very biased for the military. This is something that I've been doing since my first term in office. And let me just start, for example, by the easier questions, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have, if I'm not mistaken, about 150,000 men and women in uniform. Is that correct, Your Honor?
139,849, Mr. President. But including civilian employees and CAFGU, the total would be 211,058. But the uniform, the active uniform personnel, 139,849.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Your Honor, in most armed forces, the service members are always given the proper benefits, the proper accoutrements. But I understand that in our military, even the matter of living quarters have been very, very badly handled. I don't know which administration did that, but obviously our men and women in uniform have families. They themselves ought to be able to stay near the headquarters, and I understand they are very short of barracks all over the country. Now, barracks is synonymous with the military. Without barracks, where are they going to stay? And I understand, would the gentleman be aware of the fact that there is a need to create more barracks in the military?
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. They really need decent
Living
housing,
quarters.
living quarters, Mr.
And
President.
Your Honor, there are two ways to go about it. One is while they're in duty, they can stay in camp in what they call bachelor officers' quarters, or accompanied duties. For example, their families are with them, if the terms are correct, I apply. I understand that we are short by so many barrack space in the military. Would you be aware of these shortages?
Yes, Mr. President. As of 2016, only 9,318 military personnel with families were provided with on-base housing out of the 54,652 military personnel. You can just imagine the...
So they rent outside?
That's called off-base housing units.
Off-base
And they're
housing.
provided with 1,500 pesos quarters allowance.
But shouldn't this country have a government that should provide for the housing needs of our men and women in uniform? I'm sure you'll agree with me on that matter.
Yes, Mr. President. But that's different. Those who are given off-base housing units, instead, they're given a quarter allowance of 1,500 pesos.
But is that good for morale, or is that good for even pragmatic purposes when there's a call-up? it will not be effective, wouldn't it?
Well, definitely not, Mr. President.
So I hope the gentleman would not mind if I move to have an amendment in the budget that we provide our soldiers with adequate housing by way of barracks, and we will do the arithmetic or the
Yes.
math so that that should not be a problem anymore. Otherwise, we could think of other things like public-private partnership, rent-to-own, if you will, with the housing allowances, so that we don't have the problems as they have in Bonifacio or Aguinaldo, where some of our soldiers are demeaned because they have no place to go and they have to hang on to the barracks. So we could have barracks built right alongside some of these camps all over the country, so much so that they can stay there and take advantage of base schools or base commissaries, Your Honor.
They will gladly assist you do the math, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor, and
So you can introduce the proper amendment at the proper time.
I would be very, very happy to do that, Mr. President, because I live beside the Subic Bay Naval Base, and I've always marveled at the way they treated their armed forces, and I would like to see that happen, Your Honor, in our own armed forces. Better than that, in fact. In fact, I'm suggesting, Mr. President, that I understand they have a commissary already in the bases, but I wouldn't mind extending commissary privileges also in Subic, in Clark, and in the duty-free stores of our country. And I would like to file an amendment later on in another law so that that will be part of the benefits of our armed forces.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that.
Now, Your Honor, since we agree on that now, I think we can agree also on the fact that we do have external threats and internal threats. And I must be honest, I tried to do my homework, and I'm glad that I had the privilege of being with General Guerrero and his staff, a very able staff, in a very good tete-a-tete. That's why I was up there. And according to General Guerrero, the main threat right now is ISIS in our country. Would you agree with that, Your Honor?
Yes, but although after the Marawi siege, I think the threat has been lessened somewhat, has been reduced.
But nonetheless, that is still a threat, and I kind of
That's
agree
still a
with
threat.
that because their base of support comes from basically the Abu Sayyaf, and I think we have not been able to completely capture or dismantle the whole machinery, and I think that we should continue the march towards conducting what I call a campaign. Would you agree with me that one of the reasons why we have had the Abu Sayyaf, and I don't want to embarrass the military, even the past military, there have always been talks about, we will take care of the Abu Sayyaf in 3 months. They're only down to 300. They're only down to 400. I've heard that many, many times, even when I was Secretary of Tourism. And yet the Abu Sayyaf remains a very, very disturbing and very annoying, if not lethal, group of people who kidnap and kill people and embarrass the whole country. And having said that, therefore, Mr. President, I would hope that we can provide our military with the means to eradicate this problem and bring forth peace finally in our country. Having said that, Your Honor, I was going to say that insofar as this is concerned, it troubles me that we may not have the munitions. And like I said in the past, there have been promises made that this is going to be eliminated. They would need a very strong intelligence fund to be able to use that money to get allies within, let's say, Sulu and the Visayas and the Asilan and in other areas that could be affected. How much would the intelligence fund be, Your Honor? And would that be adequate? I believe it's about 1.8 billion.
Yeah, 1.895 billion, Mr. President.
So would that be sufficient, Your Honor, sufficient to make sure that we are able to continue the march? Because I was beginning to say, and I'm glad I got it back, senior moments, Mr. President. I was referring to a campaign, a word that we do not use very much in our military. Almost like we are reacting to every fire that is set by the Abu Sayyaf. What I'd like to introduce back into the vocabulary is that when we do a campaign, as they did before during the American period here, Pershing waged a campaign in. And a campaign means it's a second election. You finish it until the last.
Yes.
It doesn't go in and then go out, and we go in and then somebody forces us to go out again. I mean, is that policy wise, Your Honor? I think it might be a very good idea to allow, as we did, and I'm very happy that we had the president that went all out on the Marawi, and even ASEAN took notice of that. That was a campaign that was finished, and it was done by our armed forces, and that's a big boost to the morale of our people, and the sacrifices are really well worth it. So, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. President, would that now be the policy to wage a campaign, for example, to finish off the enemies of the state?
Learning from the experience of Marawi, I think that would be a good policy.
So,
when you launch a campaign against any terror groups or any threat groups, then you should really reach its logical conclusion, finish them.
in other words, it doesn't become a task force. We are a task force-oriented country. Every problem we create a task force. But this time, we're going to have the policy of a campaign to finish until the business is taken care of. Would that be the thread now, Your Honor?
And thank you for making us realize that, Mr. President. That should be, as a matter of policy, should be followed, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm thankful because I've always thought about that. Even the Romans, you went to the academy, and I'm sure you studied all the Roman campaigns of Julius Caesar and all the others. They always called it a campaign because they started something and they finished it. They completed it. That's how they conquered most of Gaul, most of other areas. I'm glad that that is going to happen, and the government should really give, the people should give them the support. And I think we are reaping the benefits of that. The people respect the military a lot more, and you can come home, our soldiers can come home to their families with their heads up high. Now let me just go now to providing our military the necessary strength. And again, this is a campaign. I emphasize this. A campaign must be made to enrich the country and strengthen our military. That's the only way we can get out of the hole that we're in for the last so many decades. We have never grown as a great country, Your Honor. So I just wanted to copy the slogan made by the Japanese in the Meiji Restoration when they realized that they were far behind the Western powers when Commodore Perry went to Japan. And the campaign in Japanese, of course, was enrich the country and strengthen the military. Having said that, there is also a Latin maxim that I would like to use here. And I think it goes like, si vis pacem para bellum. If we want the peace, prepare for war. If we want peace, prepare for war. Si vis pacem para bellum. And that means we should give the military the wherewithal. And having said that, let me start with our, I suppose, with our Navy. Because our Navy has to protect 7,143 islands, which is very porous to smuggling, to piracy, to intrusion by the enemies of the state. And I would imagine that we would be providing our Navy, not necessarily with a blue water fleet, but a littoral Navy. Means that we're protecting the shorelines. Are we headed towards this direction? Is there capital infusion? And if not, should we not prepare for the next 5 years, or even right away, as much as possible, put in a lot of money into this so that we now have a respectable, credible clout in terms of our oceans, our internal waters, and protecting internal waters of the country?
Well, they still enjoy the revised AFP Modernization Act that we passed, and for this year, they're entitled to another 25 billion
But what
for the modernization.
I guess what I'm trying to hint at is why only 25?
No,
And how much
it's
should we give next year if it's 25?
another
that we can
25,
afford?
Mr. President. Every year, they're receiving 25 billion.
Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to see our neighbors realize that we are serious. that our military will get the wherewithal. That, it's 25 this year in order to reach a point where we can adequately say they can really protect us. We should aim for a budget for the next 5 or 10 years or 30 years. And that is the plan that I'd like to see.
For the next 5 years, they will be receiving that much. But I'm glad you mentioned that because we can again file a bill and pass a law, enact a law to give them another shot at modernization.
Yes, Your Honor, because I was there when they took out the bases and they said, oh, the bases land should be, is going to get their equipment from barracks to everything. But, you know, it hurts me when I see my president or our president say, thank you, Russia, for giving us AK-47s. Thank you, China, for giving us munitions. I mean, these are things that we should have. I was part of, I think Senator Jolon will remember that we were both in Accra. I was made president of the Nobel Company here many years ago, and that was part of the armaments preparation of our country. So I would imagine that I hope the Senate will take note of this, that there is a campaign to modernize our country. And we're not going to wait for tomorrow. We're going to do it today, and we're going to increase and intensify it the next day until we get to where we want, and we will maintain that position. And that is the point I'd like to make. Consider, Mr. President, that when you look at our Navy and compare it with other countries, there are the statistics and on the board. You'll note that the Philippines has 4 frigates, 10 corvettes, 36 patrol craft, and 2 SSVs. I understand we also got recently 3 patrol craft that are fast patrol craft on water. I mean, I would like to hear from our military how much they will need to be able to be credible in terms of the Navy. What they need that we could have that within the next 3-5 years maybe. Certainly, not just an appreciable, but a very significant jump. We run our military. When you compare it with Indonesia, Indonesia has 7, their corvettes are 24. They have 4 submarines. They have 74 patrol craft. They have mine warfare vessels of 12. They have fighter aircraft, 39. They have attack aircraft of 8, which I think are the old OV-10s. We don't even have a fighter, super performing or high performance fighter like the F-15 or the F-16. Now, when you compare us, Your Honor, with Singapore, Singapore would have submarines, and Singapore is only as big as Subic Bay, Your Honor. When you compare us with Singapore, they would have F-15s, F-16s, and all the new aircraft. Can you show some of the features of Singapore? Because I always use that as an example. There you go. Equipment of Singapore Air Force, they have F-15s, F-16s, F-5s which you don't even have anymore. They even have Hawkeye aircraft. And this is a small city state. And the Philippines doesn't even have anymore the F-5s. And what we have is the Korean trainer, not familiar so much with the F-A-50, Your Honor, which is really a trainer. And we have equipped it with little weapons. And now go only on one bomb run at a time and drop only so much ordnance. So I'd imagine that if we do this, there will be a lot more respect. Now, I remember I started the question with, if the ISIS is the threat, we have to look at our neighbors around us. And we have China. They're our friends. But you will recall, Your Honor, that for a while, the British were the friends of America, but until before World War I, the British were regarded as the biggest threat to America. Even Canada considered America its biggest threat as early as right before World War I or World War II, if I'm not mistaken. So you look at the capacity of your neighbor, not the intent. That's where I think we would have to have a pronounced shift in policy. We look at the capacity of our neighbors, and we must, not just their intent, they want to be friends, but it's always good to have something. I'm sure China is not happy with Korea having a nuclear bomb. It's right beside them. And so is Russia. So is South Korea, so is Japan. So there is some rearming going on in our area, but the Philippines cannot remain passive and as is. So, again, I guess I'm trying to convince our colleagues here, Mr. Chair, Mr. Sponsor, that we have to make a decision right now to start providing the vision to our armed forces that they would have the wherewithal, just as a little country, city-state called Singapore has. I'm not even looking at Malaysia, which has the Soviet MiG, Sukhoi, no? MiG-29s. And they have F-16s as well. And I think Singapore has an F-18, quite frankly. I remember I saw them have an F-18. But we have to have our own cloud so much so that if anybody threatens us, we can at least give them a bloody nose. And I submit that I come from the thinking that even Finland beat the Russians before World War II. And they were able to stop the Russian advance to Finland. That's why they're still an independent country. So that is why I'm talking about a campaign for our military to finally not make the little pity-patty punchers that we have, but to really come out with the equipment, weapon, and the training that our soldiers deserve to have. That is my beef right now, my point.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're learning.
I'm sure, Your Honor, you will recall that in 2009, I did practically the same spiel here. It's now 2017, and we've even gotten worse. So, I guess we must learn by our mistakes. And we know God never learns, because He doesn't make mistakes. But we have to provide for ourselves insofar as this is concerned. Now, we have an army of 85,000 people, and the whole AFP is 139,000. And if ISIS is going to be a threat, Your Honor, we just were exposed to urban warfare. I just came from a conference in Turkey, and I took the time to take a look at the Turkish capability, and they have capability. In fact, they're taking care of 3 million IDPs, but their armed forces are at the ready. We look at their recent history, they shot down a Russian aircraft, and they're able to hold their own against all neighbors. In other words, they're respected, whether we like it or not. And that is what I'd like to see for our country, to get that respect. May ibubuga, Tagalog. Dapat siguro magawa natin. So, Your Honor, within now and the next few days, I suppose, we would like to urge our colleagues to hopefully try and find our way clear. Instead of 25 billion, look for an extra 25, maybe 10.
They're actually asking DBM to release 59
Yes.
every year.
Yes.
Billion, but DBM is only releasing 25.
Isn't there a way, Your Honor, that we can increase the budget of our military so that indeed we can find some money outside relying somewhere elsewhere and to try and increase the resources of our servicemen? I remember President Duterte saying another concern is our soldiers are unable to say. That's why he told us he was going to increase the soldiery of our country. Because napapagod rin yung mga sundalo natin. Lalo pag naka-armor, hinihingal talaga pagka lumalakad. And that is why he wants more soldiers in our AFP. I agree. So, for that, we would need more budget, Your Honor. And as sponsor,
the
is there a
problem
possibility
actually is
that we can increase the budget?
The problem actually, Mr. President, Your Honor, is in the releases. DBM has failed to release. So far, 19.9 billion is still unreleased. Malaki yung utang ng DBM sa DND, Mr. President. AFP. So maybe in the exercise of our oversight function, we can ask DBM to explain why they're not releasing what is due to the AFP, to the DND.
You're giving me a very strong hint, Your Honor, that we should conduct an investigation. Say that they are negligent, tasked to protect the country. And if they're short, then we must make sure that they provide the budget for our military. Would the gentleman agree to that?
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. Sa 2017 nga eh, 5.085 billion lang yung nare-release. Yun nga, sabi ko kanina, 19.9 billion remains to be released.
It's sad. It's sad because we may have been skillful this time. I don't want to use the word lucky. But I would hate to lose because we did not have the budget. I would hate to lose if we ran out of bullets. By the way, what is our ammunition inventory? How long a war can we fight with our present inventory? I remember during the siege of during President Estrada's time, we almost ran out of bullets.
Are we talking here?
And while we're on that topic, Your Honor, I'd like to be corrected. In our government arsenal, our machines for making our munitions are 29 to 30 years old. 29 to 30 years old. So how can we develop our capability if we have machines that are thoroughly outdated?
Sa heavy. Sa mga small arms, marami tayong ammo, no problem. Pero yung mga major arms na kailangan natin, yung mga munitions talaga.
Howitzers.
Well, yes. Bombs.
Pati ba AK-47, kailangan natin ng bala or
Hindi naman, they're considered
M16
small
rifles?
arms na, di
I
ba?
understand. I remember one time, the former Secretary of Defense, Abelino Cruz, was telling me that yung groove ng ating mga M16s, wala na. So, namamasyal na yung bala pag pinutok mo, hindi na diretso takbo. Is that true? We got M16s made in China.
Wala na.
Enforce. Air Force. So there is an MNR, part of the alphabet. So, Your Honor, what I'm trying to say in this interpellation is really trying to find a way to send a message, shot in the bow, so to speak. We can increase, and if they're not being given the releases, we should exert a little bit more pressure on DBM. After all, they're asking us to increase the taxes. And by the way, in Turkey, they have high taxation, but everybody is happy. Their trains run, they're protected there by their military, and they're very unforgiving corruption. So I would imagine that we can do that here, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. President, I hope so too. And I will always remember what you flash on the screen: enrich the country, strengthen the military.
That's correct, Your Honor, and that's something that has made an impression on me since I took Japanese history and government, not too very long ago, Ateneo. But I think this is something that I would like to share with our military. That should be our motto. If you want to win the peace, you have to prepare for war.
Yes.
Civis pacem parabellum. And on that note, Your Honor, I would like to thank the gentleman, and let me assure our soldiers that the Senate is ready to support them. I don't speak for the Senate. I can only speak for my voice here, and I'm sure Senator Lacson joins me here and all the others here present. We would like to support our military properly. Let's make this a campaign. Let's not make this a stop-and-go drive, just as we used to do when our soldiers died. When we were about to capture the enemy, somebody from Malacanang will say, "Hold it, pull back." Let's make it a campaign to win.
I guess it doesn't happen anymore, Mr. President.
Well, with the new president, it doesn't happen
Instead of
anymore.
saying stop,
We have to commend.
he always says go.
Go beyond.
Yeah.
And well, I would like it to. I would like the campaign create very, very credible military, and it must start right away, right from this chamber, Mr. President. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity
Thank you,
to
Senator
vent
Gordon.
Thank you.
my emotions on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
President,
Gordon.
may we now recognize the President Pro Temp, Senator Ralph Recto.
Thank you, Mr.
Senate
Majority
President
Leader.
Pro
Thank
Tem
you,
is
Mr. President. Would the sponsor of the budget of the DND yield to just a very few questions?
To the distinguished Pro Temp, willingly, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I took note of the comments made by the earlier interpolator, especially with regard to Singapore, showing us what equipment they have. And I was talking to the Senate President that our economy is bigger than that of Singapore. But Singapore has this equipment and the Philippines does not.
We also have more debt than Singapore, Mr. President.
Well, that is true, but no longer, Mr. President. Now, having said that, Mr. President, I note that the budget of the DND is roughly 194 billion. Is that correct?
199. As of the
yes.
Senate version, Mr. President.
Correct.
That's
And
including
of that-
pension.
correct. That includes the pension. So the 199 minus 50 billion for the pension. So the real operating budget of the DND is 149 billion. Is that correct?
146
Yeah, thereabouts.
billion. That's correct,
Because
Mr.
a
President.
significant portion is the for the pensions. 50 plus billion. Is that
52
correct? 52 billion.
billion, yeah.
Okay, now, of the remaining 146 billion, there is still another 25 billion that is in the
Modernization.
modernization. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. President.
So it's more than 144 plus the modernization. Am I correct? So that's
Correct,
included.
sir, Mr. President.
Yes.
That's inclusive
That's
of
inclusive.
the Modernization Fund.
Okay. Okay. Now, of the 144, roughly 80 billion, a little more than that, is for the salaries. Yes.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. President.
Okay. Now, the
82 billion.
correct. And the maintenance operating expenditures of the DND, ibig sabihin, pang consumables, pala, so on and so forth, gasolina, electricity expenses, so on and so forth, is 35 billion.
35.5, Mr. President.
And
That's
equipment outlay, capital outlay, is 27 billion.
28. Senate version. Yeah,
thereabout,
Senate
correct.
version is 38 billion. Mr. President.
Okay.
28 billion.
That's
Mr.
for 2018.
Yes.
Now, I note that in 2017, they were given roughly 30 billion, program 25 billion, and an unprogram of 5 billion for AFP modernization 30.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. President.
In 2017.
2017.
This year, magkano yung AFP modernization?
25 billion, Mr. President.
25 billion. In 2017, I note that what was released was only 4.3 billion. Is that correct?
4.9 billion was released.
Okay. So, bakit 4.9 billion lang ang pinilis ng DBM? When what we appropriated, based on the request of the President and the Executive, was 25 billion.
But that's the same question raised by Senator Gordon, Mr. President. And I think we should urge or prod Secretary Jokno to release what's being asked by the armed forces, by the DND, Mr. President.
Now, we passed a law, the AFP Modernization Program 2,
Yes.
and I note that in 2014, the first year we funded this, we allotted 5 billion from in program, 5 billion unprogram. I think this was the law that the presiding officer today, the Senate President, spearheaded here in the Senate, if I'm not mistaken. We passed this in 2012.
I was the chairman of
That's
the
right. The
Defense
sponsor, yes.
Committee,
Correct.
Mr. President.
Correct. And we promised them at least 35 billion in 5 years.
75.
At least in
At least.
5 years.
That is correct, Mr.
Okay.
President.
And we started to fund it in 2014.
Starting with 5 billion in 2014.
Program and unprogram of 10.
Of 10, yes.
9.7 was released.
Yes.
In 2015,
All of-
program of 20, unprogram of 10.
Only
20
20.
billion was released.
Yes.
And in 2016, 25 billion program, 10 billion unprogram, 23 billion was released.
25, actually, Mr. President,
Okay.
was released.
And in 2017, we appropriated 30 billion and 4.3 billion lang.
5 billion, 85 million was released.
Yes.
In 2017.
So why sudden drop in the release of the AFP modernization? When the economy is growing double digit nominally. And there is no lack of appropriation, there is no lack of cash available.
I agree with you, Mr. President. That's why I'm also wondering why DBM has refused to release the full amount to the DND.
Now, Congress has appropriated 75 billion in the last 4 years, and only 57 billion has been
59.8 billion.
thereabouts.
Yeah, thereabouts.
So 26 ang hindi na-release. Now, moving forward, we need to say 4.3. Now, when we say released, this may not even be obligated. Baka allotment lang to, ni hindi obligation. Or obligated na ba to, just to put this on record? Obligated na.
Ang obligation nila mataas, Mr. President. Ang natirang balance na lang is 561 million.
Yeah. So of the 57 or 59?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay, so that's good. So, but still the fact remains, kung mataas, kaya-kaya lang i-obligate. The appropriation is available. And then in 2017, when we had Marawi, that is the most important time that we needed this equipment, I suppose. And yet, only 4.3 billion was released. Now, it is already toward the end of the year, end of November. Would we know from our resource persons if in their conversations with the DBM, inaasahan ba nila ma-release yung 20 billion more na appropriated this year?
Well, there's already commitment from DBM.
Okay, so ano mangyayari? Ipapark natin yung pera na window dressing, kunwari na obligate, under the DBM.
So, but you're ready to...
Or will they have a bidding?
Yes. Actually, awaiting awards na lang ito eh. Diba?
Okay. So, are they saying that we can spend the 20 billion more?
Definitely,
For the year?
Mr. President. Kaya.
Very good. So, ibig sabihin, kayang-kaya ninyo spend ang 25 billion. And is there any technical deficit in the DND or in the branches of the armed forces that you cannot spend the money? Kayang-kaya.
There's none. Kayang-kaya.
Assuming you double the AFP modernization to 50 billion, can obligate.
They're confident. They can obligate, Mr. President.
Okay. Now, and as I mentioned earlier, during the earlier part of the interpellation with the DND, and we had a conversation with the sponsor earlier, and we were comparing notes on possible cuts in the national budget. And I made mention to the sponsor that, I've identified 147 billion in cuts. That 100 billion we can realign to the AFP, the PNP, counter-terrorism, insurgency, modernization, additional salaries as requested by the President. Marawi rehabilitation, full funding of your universal access to education, and a cut of 30 billion in the budget so that there's less pressure to raise taxes.
You and your staff did a more extensive research on the proposed budget because we only focus on the DPWH budget and we were able to
70 billion.
realize some 72 billion.
Correct.
Mr.
It's
President.
because you have the same numbers on the DPW.
Yes.
And that's where I'm coming from, Mr. President. No? So I'm concerned. Now let me ask. The intelligence budget of the DND next year is roughly 1.9 billion.
1.895 billion.
Yes,
Correct, Mr.
1.9
President.
billion. Will we have assurance from the DND, assuming we increase their budget and further, na hindi na mauulit yung Marawi?
Cannot be, they cannot assure that because terrorism is one, something that you cannot predict. You can only enhance your intelligence
correct,
capability,
correct.
but you cannot predict
Now,
when they will exactly
I understand.
strike.
I understand. But the point is this. But that is the purpose of giving them intelligence funds and with that. Okay? Halimbawa, today, is there any credible threat on terrorism? For
My
example,
own information, I'm not relying on the military on this information. I got this from other sources. There's still a threat in the other areas of Mindanao.
yes, correct.
From the ISIS,
Correct.
as a matter of fact.
Okay. And that is my concern, Mr. President. And I think that's the concern of many us here and many other Filipinos, our countrymen. Now, is that threat only in Mindanao, or does it extend today to Visayas and into Luzon or in Metro Manila?
I don't know about the military, but my own information is just in Mindanao
Yes.
so far.
Could we hear also from the resource persons? Is that
Not really a major threat, but the probability is there, Mr. President.
but not a major one? So it's a low probability.
Yes.
That's good to hear. Now, low probability. Am I correct? A correct assessment. So,
Very low probability.
so chances are, when I asked the question earlier, that the military seems to be confident that there will be no repeat of Marawi. Because I saw the secretary and the
Yes, they
top
are
brass
con-
nodding their heads.
They're confident
They're
that there will be no repeat of Marawi in the same magnitude, Mr. President.
Okay. So we have learned our lesson as far as Marawi is concerned. And it's a painful and very expensive lesson.
Very expensive and very painful
Correct.
as well.
Huh?
165, you know? Well, this.
Now, so that's another question I have. How many people died from the armed forces?
165.
How many people
That's combined armed forces and the
in
PNP.
the PNP? Okay. How many people, how many of our, the terrorists were killed?
800, almost 900.
And how many of our AFP, PNP personnel are maimed,
Wounded.
wounded?
1,000 plus, Mr. President.
Mga
Wounded
ilan?
in action.
Almost 2,000?
1,700.
And that's what I've heard. 1,700 na baldado. Now, how much are we giving mga nabaldado?
I heard the President that he allotted something like 500,000 per wounded. No? Per killed in action, 500,000. And for the wounded in action, 150,000 per.
Is that by law?
I don't think so, Mr.
Dagdag
President.
lang yan by law. Because the law talks about the amounts also.
Yes, but this is from
The
the President's
Presidential
own
Social
initiative.
Fund.
Yeah.
Now, would it be appropriate to review? Magkano bang nakukuha aside from the Presidential Social Fund?
Maliit lang yan.
Lang.
Marawi is, a class...
Of its own, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. But nevertheless, we want to give the right signal to our soldiers who died, not only died for us,
Well, I can say that right now, the morale of the soldiers, of our soldiers and policemen, would not be any higher.
yes, and that morale could be higher even more if we send the signal that we are willing to increase
Yes.
assistance.
If we institutionalize
Correct.
the support.
Oo. And we can start it in the 2018 budget.
I agree, Mr. President.
So thank you for that. And I'm sure that the gentleman, kaysa naman magastos yung pera sa, o hindi magastos yung pera.
Yes.
And we are both projecting 600 billion, hindi nga magagastos na.
That is correct, Mr. President.
So, ano ba
Because in
naman yung-
2016, 596 na eh,
Oh,
yung unused.
yeah. So next year, can you imagine how much in unused?
More than 600. Your estimate is correct.
That's right. And that's precisely my point. If they can spend it for the modernization, why not? For anti-terrorism, why not? For those wounded in action, why not? Ayaw naman eh. Okay. Now, let me ask also very briefly, how much was the cost of Marawi as far as the armed forces is concerned? Magkano ginastos natin doon sa bakbakan?
From the regular fund, 3.289 billion, Mr. President. And sa contingent fund ng Presidente, 2.739 billion. So for a
5
total of
billion, roughly.
almost 6 billion.
Billion. 6 billion. Now, rehabilitation of Marawi, the budget for next year is only 10 billion.
And DOF is requesting to the Senate to add another 5 billion.
5 billion.
Because in their estimate, to take 15 billion for next year. But here's the catch. The post-conflict needs assessment is yet to be finished.
Correct.
I understand it will be finished by May or June, no? As a OCD. And they're going to start, or they're going to even draft the CRRP, or the Comprehensive Rehabilitation and Recovery Plan, without the post-conflict needs assessment, because that will be the basis.
Yes. I agree, Mr. President. And the reason why I asked this is simple. That 10 billion was the purpose, and plus the 5, the purpose of which is to provide for the public infrastructure.
Maybe they will just focus on the low-hanging fruits muna.
Correct. Halimbawa,
Yung
kalsada.
pang given na, hindi na
City
kailangan
Hall.
pag-aralan.
Oh, kalsada, PTO,
Yes.
eskwelahan, kuryente, patubig. Now, the question is, I've not been to Marawi and I badly want to be. And say for us to be. But the point is this. From what I see on TV, walang natirang bahay. So what is the use of spending 50 billion in public infrastructure kung wala naman private na bahay? Now, if there are 40,000 households in Marawi, 200,000 displaced, I think that's the data. Now, that's roughly 40,000 households. Pag binigyan mo ng 1 milyon kada isang house to rebuild their homes, that's 40 billion. Pag 2 million per household,
80.
that's 80 billion. Ubus eh. So, that is not in the budget. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think the NHA can replicate the homes. At may wastage pa yan kung gobyerno ang gumawa. Why not just give those families the financing, the money, para sila na yung gumawa ng mga bahay nila. Sabay-sabay.
It may sound simple and easy, Mr. President, but identifying the real recipients would be difficult.
I think there should be records naman. May ano yan eh, may tawag dito. Some may titulo, some wala. Some may tawag dito, tax declaration yan.
That will be determined by the PCNA, Mr.
Yes, I
President.
understand. I do not wish to go to details, but I'm just giving you an idea of the cost of rebuilding Marawi just from the private side. 1 million each household, that's 40 billion. 2 million each, that's 80 billion. Ganun kalaki yun. And we might, if government decides to do that, then we can put a special provision in the budget to allow it. Dahil baka sabihin ng COA, bawal. Tulong sa pamilya. I mean, that's something that we're trying to work on right now. But going back to the DND budget. So ang ginastos was 5 billion. Marawi is destroyed. The cost of Marawi siguro is more than 100 billion. Not to mention the opportunity loss, the economic activity. Yes. Because of 900 rebels. Can you imagine if this happens to 10 or 12 more other? I think this is a wake-up call. And this budget was crafted for the Marawi incident. Pa natin naiisip yung Marawi nung ginawa ng DB budget. That's something we should think about. We have a week to think about it because we have to propose a measure. And I think that moving forward, this is a wake-up call to improve the capability of the AFP, the PA. It is more costly not to improve their capability and having another Marawi in several areas. Can you imagine if this happened in Mexico?
I don't want to imagine, Mr. President.
Yes. The economy would tank. Can you imagine air raids and bombing in Metro Manila? So all the more it is very critical, Mr. President. No? And I also noticed that during the war in Marawi, kulang na kulang din yung gamit na. Imagine relying on, mabuti na lang may kaibigan tayong Chinese,
Especially for their technical surveillance equipment, di ba?
Oh, yeah. Yung mga drones. Now, the point is, shouldn't we have that? Why should we be relying on international support for this?
That's part of the acquisition, planned
correct.
acquisition of the armed forces.
Also now that the President is a believer in the national security. So now is the time to do it. So I'm sure that the gentleman coming from PMA will agree and supports many of these initiatives.
Oh, definitely, Mr. President.
Yes. So having said that, Mr. President, I know that the time is late. The budget of the DND is in good hands. And I look forward with collaborating with and with the presiding officer and the members of the Senate too. Remember, the budget was not crafted post-Marawi.
Yes.
It was pre-Marawi. Things have changed. And we have seen the cost. So thank you very much to our sponsor and to my colleagues for their patience. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Recto. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, there are no more interpellations. I move to close the period of interpellations and consider the budget of the Department of National Defense and its attached agencies as deemed submitted.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to resume consideration of the budget of the Bureau of Customs.
Any objection?